Picture this. You're in a room full of influential people, investors with millions at their disposal, yet, you're standing there, a little unsure, presenting your big idea. You've worked so hard on it, the sleepless nights, the countless hours of research, and now, it's finally your turn to pitch. You stand tall, take a deep breath, and start sharing your vision. Everyone listens, some nod politely, but then, there's this one person who, without hesitation, scoffs. They laugh, not in a supportive way, but with pure mockery. They dismiss your idea as if it's the most ridiculous thing they've ever heard, and they make it clear that, to them, you're just wasting their time. That's exactly what happened to Sarah Matthews, a young entrepreneur who dared to dream big. But here's the thing, after publicly mocking her, this same investor turned around and dropped $1 million into her business just 24 hours later. Sounds unbelievable, right? Well, buckle up, because this is a story you won't want to miss. You might be asking yourself, how could this happen? How could someone mock an idea, ridicule a person, and then invest so heavily in the very same concept they had dismissed so harshly? It's a twist so shocking that it'll make you question everything you think you know about business, success, and the people who hold the keys to your future. But I'm going to tell you exactly how this all went down. Stick with me for the next few minutes because I'm about to reveal the truth behind this dramatic turn of events, and trust me, it's not what you think. First, let me set the stage. Sarah Matthews, a young, ambitious entrepreneur, had been working tirelessly on a business idea she believed could change the world. It wasn't the most glamorous concept. It wasn't a flashy product or a shiny new thing that everyone in Silicon Valley was talking about. No, her idea was simple, almost understated, but it had the potential to revolutionize an entire industry. Sarah wasn't trying to reinvent the wheel. She wasn't trying to create something that no one had ever seen before. Instead, she was solving a problem that had been around for decades, an issue that many businesses and consumers had overlooked for far too long. But, when she pitched her idea to one of the biggest investors in the room, someone who had funded countless successful startups, he didn't see it that way. In fact, his response was harsh. He made a show of laughing, shaking his head as if Sarah were some naive kid playing pretend in the big leagues. It was as if he couldn't fathom that someone like her could even dream of succeeding in the ultra-competitive business world. He looked at her idea and dismissed it as small, unimpressive, and nothing special. But here's where it gets interesting. Less than 24 hours later, the very same investor who had scoffed and ridiculed her in front of the entire room did something that stunned everyone. He called her up, and without so much as a second thought, he offered her a check for $1 million to help fund her business. And I'm not talking about a casual investment or a couple thousand to show support. No. This was a full-blown, six-figure investment that would change Sarah's life forever. So, what happened in those 24 hours? Was he playing some kind of psychological game, trying to test her resolve? Or did he see something in her idea that he had missed in the heat of the moment? Was it pure business strategy or something deeper at play? Now, I know you're probably on the edge of your seat, wondering how a person could go from mocking to investing, especially in such a short amount of time. You're asking yourself, was he wrong at first? Did he regret his words? Or was there something else going on that we're not seeing? That's exactly what we're going to dive into today. Because this isn't just a story about one investor, one entrepreneur, and $1 million deal. No, it's a story about perception, timing, and the hidden forces that shape decisions in the business world. And you, my friend, are going to get answers to those questions. But here's the twist, this story is about more than just business. It's about confidence, resilience, and the incredible power of believing in yourself when everyone else doubts you. It's about how those moments of rejection, ridicule, and skepticism can sometimes be the very things that lead you to success. It's about how the ones who mock you today might be the ones who invest in you tomorrow. And it's about understanding the mindset of successful people, how they see things others don't, and how they make decisions that can seem unpredictable to the untrained eye. But before we go any further, let me ask you this. What would you do if you were Sarah? If you poured your heart into an idea, only to have someone with millions at stake mock it, ridicule you, and write you off as a failure? How would you react? Would you stand tall and keep pushing forward, or would you walk away defeated, questioning everything you thought you knew about your own potential. I'll be honest with you, this story isn't just about Sarah and this investor. It's about you too. How many times have you been mocked or doubted? How many times have you felt like your dreams were too big, too impossible for anyone to believe in? But here's the thing, the greatest successes often come from the people who were told they couldn't do it, who were laughed at or rejected. And sometimes, those same people turn out to be the ones who change the world. So, you may be wondering what happened next. Why would this investor do such a thing? What led him to do a complete 180 and offer that life-changing investment? Stick with me, because we're about to dive deeper into the psychology of this situation, the behind-the-scenes motivations, and the unexpected turn of events that left everyone, including Sarah, speechless. But before I reveal the full story, I want you to pause and think about the lessons this experience can teach us all. The business world is full of twists and turns. It's full of rejection, challenges, and obstacles that can make you question whether it's all worth it. But stories like Sarah's remind us that sometimes, the people who doubt you the most are the same ones who'll be forced to take you seriously when your vision proves true. And sometimes, rejection is just the beginning of something far bigger than you ever imagined. So, what happened between Sarah and the investor? How did everything unfold? How did this one moment of mockery turn into $1 million investment? Stay tuned, because the answer is coming right up. This setup creates intrigue and personal connection with the viewer. It's designed to make them feel as we delve deeper into Sarah Matthews' journey. It's important to understand the context of her life leading up to that fateful moment, the moment when she stood before that room full of investors, the moment when her dream could have been crushed. Sarah wasn't always the confident, ambitious entrepreneur she appeared to be in that high-stakes pitch meeting. In fact, just a year before that meeting, she was sitting in a small apartment in downtown Los Angeles, struggling to make ends meet. She wasn't surrounded by piles of business books or advice from successful mentors. In fact, her reality was far from glamorous. Sarah had always been the quiet, creative type, the kind of person who spent more time scribbling down ideas than discussing them with others. But one thing Sarah always had was a fierce belief in herself, even when others doubted her. You see, Sarah didn't just wake up one day and decide to start a business. It had been a long, slow process, one that many people wouldn't have understood. She'd been working as a freelance consultant, advising small companies on how to improve their customer experiences, streamline operations, and boost sales. But it wasn't the kind of work that set her soul on fire. No, Sarah's true passion was something different, a business idea she had quietly been developing for months. It was an idea that could disrupt a stagnant industry, one that was ripe for change but, at the same time, one that had been resistant to innovation for years. Sarah had been watching this industry, observing its flaws, and envisioning a solution that was both simple and revolutionary. But the problem was, no one took her seriously. In the months leading up to that fateful pitch, Sarah had been attending networking events, talking to fellow entrepreneurs, and trying to get feedback on her idea. She wasn't getting the reception she had hoped for. Many dismissed her as just another person with a small idea that wouldn't get off the ground. Even when she reached out to established investors, the responses were lukewarm at best. They appreciated her enthusiasm, but they didn't see the value. That's when she met David Turner, the very investor who would mock her idea and then later offer her $1 million. David was a well-known figure in the venture capital world, the kind of person whose approval could change the course of an entrepreneur's career overnight. He was charismatic, sharp, and appeared to have the Midas touch. Everything he invested in seemed to turn into gold. But there was something about David that never quite sat right with Sarah. David had a reputation, and not necessarily a good one. Behind his polished exterior and charming smile, there were whispers about his approach to business. Some said he was a genius, able to spot a winner before anyone else could. Others, however, described him as manipulative, someone who played games with people, toying with their dreams just to see if they would break. There were rumors of him taking credit for others' ideas, of being a master at leveraging relationships for his own benefit. But when Sarah first met him, she was too caught up in the excitement of possibly securing funding to consider those rumors seriously. Still, a nagging feeling lingered in the back of her mind. Why would someone as successful as David show interest in her, a nobody with a small idea, unless there was something he wanted from her? Was he just another investor, or was there something more sinister at play? In the days leading up to the pitch, Sarah had been getting mixed signals from David. At first, he had shown a slight interest in her idea. He'd asked her some questions, seemed to be genuinely curious, and even gave a few encouraging words. But as the day of the pitch approached, his attitude shifted. He became distant, cold, and almost dismissive. When she finally walked into that meeting room, there he was, sitting at the table with a few other investors, exuding confidence, while she stood there, feeling like the underdog once again. And then, when she began her pitch, that's when it happened. David laughed. He mocked her, ridiculed her idea in front of everyone in the room, and left her speechless. Sarah felt the blood drain from her face as he told her that she was wasting everyone's time with such an unrealistic vision. But here's where things start to get even more mysterious. Why would David behave this way? Why would someone with the power to make or break Sarah's future be so harsh, so publicly dismissive? Was it because he genuinely didn't believe in her idea, or was there something else going on? Perhaps David didn't see Sarah's business as a viable investment at that moment, but maybe, just maybe, he was testing her. After all, there's a well-known saying in the business world, it's not about how you start, it's about how you finish. Did David want to see if Sarah could bounce back from the rejection? Was he looking for a sign of resilience, of unwavering confidence, to prove that she could handle the challenges of entrepreneurship? In the days following the pitch, Sarah struggled to make sense of what had happened. She couldn't understand why David would have treated her that way. She couldn't get the words he had said out of her head. She tried to reach out to other investors, but none of them seemed interested, all echoing the same sentiment: not a good fit. That's when she decided to take matters into her own hands. She didn't back down. She doubled down. Sarah refined her pitch, made some tweaks to her business plan, and built a team of passionate individuals who believed in her vision. And somehow, through sheer determination, Sarah started gaining traction. Small successes began snowballing into bigger ones. Word of mouth started spreading about her idea, and soon, other investors took notice. But it wasn't until 24 hours after the pitch that Sarah received the call that would change everything. David's voice was calm, almost too calm, as he explained that he'd reconsidered his initial reaction. He admitted that, while he hadn't seen the potential in the idea during the pitch, he had spent the last 24 hours reviewing everything Sarah had presented. And something had clicked. He told her that he wanted to invest $1 million into her business. No negotiations, no games. Just a straight-up offer. But why? What had changed in those 24 hours? Was it a moment of clarity for David, or was there something else behind the sudden shift? There were whispers, not just about his investment tactics, but about his personal relationships too. He had a knack for making people feel like they were special, as though they were part of his inner circle, only to turn on them once they had outlived their usefulness. But every lead she followed seemed to hit a dead end. Every question she asked came back unanswered, or worse, completely erased. It was as if someone didn't want her digging deeper. And then, just when she thought she was getting closer to uncovering the truth, something happened that made her question everything she thought she knew. A key document, one that could have proven David's past dealings, disappeared from her email inbox. At first, Sarah assumed it was a mistake, a glitch, maybe, but when she tried to recover it, there was no trace. It was as if the file had never existed in the first place. The timestamp was gone, the original sender's address wiped clean from her records. Panic set in as she tried to figure out what had happened. Had someone hacked her account? Or was it something far more sinister, like someone deliberately covering their tracks? She reached out to her tech-savvy friend, Ethan, who had helped her set up her business systems. But when she asked for his help, his response was colder than she expected. Ethan had always been a reliable ally, the kind of friend who was there for her when she needed him most. But now, something felt off. He promised to help, but his tone lacked the usual warmth. When she pushed for more answers about the missing file, his response was strangely evasive. "It's probably nothing, Sarah," he said, his voice distant, almost mechanical. "You've got to let it go. Not everything is worth digging into. It wasn't like Ethan to back away from something like this. He was always the first to help uncover the truth, no matter how uncomfortable or inconvenient. Why the sudden reluctance? Did he know more than he was letting on? Was he trying to protect her, or was he hiding something? In the days that followed, Sarah's sense of unease only deepened. Ethan's behavior grew increasingly odd, and she began to wonder if he had something to do with the strange disappearance of the document. She knew she couldn't trust her instincts alone, she needed solid evidence. But as she continued to look into David's past and her own team's strange behavior, another unexpected obstacle emerged. A phone call came in late one night from an anonymous number, and when Sarah answered, the voice on the other end sent chills down her spine. "Stop looking into David Turner," the voice said, low and deliberate, almost a whisper. "You don't know what you're messing with. Back off now, or it'll be too late." Then, the line went dead. Sarah sat there, the phone still pressed against her ear, unable to move. Who was that? Was it David himself, or someone working for him? She had no way of knowing, but the message was clear: someone was watching her, and they didn't want her uncovering anything that would expose David's secrets. The next morning, as Sarah sat down to gather her thoughts, she noticed something that sent a wave of panic through her chest. Her office had been broken into. It wasn't much, nothing was taken, but her desk had been rifled through. The drawers were left open, papers were scattered across the floor, and her laptop was gone. It wasn't a random break-in. Someone had come for specific documents, the same documents she had been studying about David and his shady dealings. Was this a warning? Or was it the first move in a larger game that she hadn't even begun to understand? As Sarah scrambled to make sense of the situation, the pressure began to mount. She felt like she was being cornered, forced to make decisions she wasn't ready for. Every lead she chased seemed to take her further into a web of deception, with no clear way out. It was clear that David had more power than she had originally realized, and that power extended far beyond just money. He had connections, allies in high places who could make her life miserable if she kept digging. But Sarah wasn't ready to give up. The dream she had for her business, for the future she envisioned, was too important. She knew that she had to uncover the truth, no matter how dangerous it became. But just when Sarah thought she was getting closer to unraveling the mystery, another unexpected twist turned everything upside down. She received a package at her doorstep, one she wasn't expecting. Inside was a letter, handwritten in a bold, confident script. "We're watching you. Stop now, or there will be consequences." Who had sent it? Was this a final warning, or was it something else entirely? The tension was thick, the stakes higher than ever. Sarah's investigation was no longer just about securing funding for her business, it had become a fight for her safety and her future. The deeper she dug, the more dangerous the path became. Who was behind this? Was David Turner the mastermind pulling the strings, or was there someone else in the shadows? And who could she trust when the people closest to her seemed to be hiding their own secrets? The pieces were beginning to fall into place, but the truth was still elusive, slipping through her fingers like sand. One thing was certain: Sarah wasn't backing down. She was in too deep, and there was no turning back now. Just as Sarah was beginning to piece together what was happening, a new layer of confusion and dread was added to the already tangled web of mystery. That morning, she met with Ethan, the one person who had always been her ally, or at least, that's what she had believed. He'd been acting strange recently, but after everything that had happened, the break-in, the cryptic phone calls, and the anonymous threats, she couldn't afford to lose any more people from her corner. She needed answers, and Ethan had always been a source of clarity, the person she turned to when things got tough. But when she arrived at his apartment, something felt off. Ethan wasn't his usual self. He was visibly agitated, pacing back and forth as though he had been waiting for her. His eyes were wide, almost frantic, and he barely made eye contact when she entered. It was as though he was keeping something from her, something he was desperately trying to hide. Sarah tried to push past her doubts, but they crept in slowly, gnawing at her every time Ethan avoided a direct question. Something wasn't right, but she couldn't figure out what. Then, as she sat down at his kitchen table, something caught her eye: an envelope sitting innocently on the counter. The edges of the paper were worn, almost as if it had been handled too many times. There was no return address, just her name scrawled across the front in the same bold handwriting that had appeared in the letter Sarah had received the previous night. It wasn't a coincidence. Someone was targeting both of them. Ethan's face went pale as she reached for the envelope, and in that moment, Sarah could see a flicker of recognition in his eyes, a brief moment of fear that vanished too quickly for her to understand. She tore open the envelope, her hands trembling as she pulled out the letter. It was the same cryptic message, the same cold warning: "We're watching you. Stop now, or there will be consequences." But it wasn't just the words that sent a chill down her spine, it was the fact that this letter had been delivered to Ethan. The implications were staggering. If they were targeting him, then everything she thought she knew about the situation had just been turned on its head. Ethan had always been someone she trusted. He'd been with her from the very beginning, helping her set up her business systems, offering guidance when she didn't know where to turn. She had assumed, up until now, that he was the one person who wouldn't be part of the shady dealings she was uncovering. But now, she couldn't help but wonder if he had been playing her all along. Why would they send Ethan a warning? Was he involved in the threats against her? Or was he simply a pawn in someone else's game? Was he hiding something from her, something bigger than she had realized? As the tension between them grew thicker, Sarah decided she needed to push Ethan for answers, to get to the bottom of what was really going on. But the more she probed, the more evasive he became. At first, he tried to play it off, saying it was probably a prank or just a coincidence, but Sarah wasn't buying it. She saw through his lies. The letter wasn't a coincidence, and neither was his reaction. Finally, after what felt like hours of uncomfortable silence, Ethan's voice broke through the tension. "I never wanted to get you involved in this, Sarah," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "I didn't know how deep it went. But I think you need to walk away before it's too late." Sarah's mind raced. Walk away? From what? What was Ethan really trying to say? But before she could get another word out, there was a knock at the door. Ethan froze, his eyes wide with panic, and for a split second, Sarah thought she saw a flash of something like guilt or fear, cross his face. He quickly stood up and moved toward the door, blocking her from seeing who was on the other side. He opened it just a crack, and Sarah heard a muffled voice speaking on the other side, though she couldn't make out the words. What was going on? Who was at the door? And why was Ethan acting so suspiciously? She could feel the walls closing in around her, the weight of the secrets she was starting to uncover pressing down on her with every passing second. When Ethan finally closed the door and returned to the table, he had a completely different look on his face. Gone was the panic, replaced by a cold, almost detached demeanor. It was like someone had flipped a switch inside him. "I think it's time you knew the truth," Ethan said, his tone now devoid of any warmth. "But you're not going to like it." Sarah's heart pounded in her chest as she waited for him to continue. But before he could explain, there was another interruption. Her phone buzzed violently, and she glanced down at the screen. It was an email, sent from an anonymous address. Her breath caught in her throat as she opened the message, her eyes scanning the words in disbelief. The email contained a single line of text: "You've been lied to. Look deeper. Look deeper." What did that mean? And who was sending these messages? Was it David? Or was it someone else who wanted Sarah to uncover the truth, but was willing to play a dangerous game to get her there? As the room grew colder, the weight of the situation started to settle in. Sarah realized that she wasn't just dealing with a business deal gone wrong. This was bigger than her, bigger than David. She had somehow stumbled into something that reached far beyond her comprehension. People were lying to her, manipulating her, and using her as a pawn in a game she didn't understand. Ethan had been a part of that game. His evasiveness, his strange behavior, the hidden letter, all of it pointed to one undeniable truth: she couldn't trust him anymore. But the bigger question was, who could she trust? Could she even trust herself at this point? Sarah took a step back, trying to piece everything together, but the more she tried to connect the dots, the more scattered they seemed. The email, the threats, the warnings, it was all building toward something she couldn't yet see. And in that moment, she realized the truth. She had been playing a dangerous game, and now it was too late to walk away. But who was playing her? And who was really in control? As Sarah looked at Ethan, who now seemed like a stranger, her mind raced. What was he really hiding? And was he involved in a plot far darker than she could ever have imagined? The questions piled up, each more perplexing than the last, and the answers seemed farther out of reach than ever. The next few days felt like a blur, each one more oppressive than the last. Sarah couldn't shake the sense of dread that had settled over her like a thick, unshakable fog. The walls of her apartment seemed to close in on her at all hours of the day. Every creak of the floorboards, every flicker of the lights, sent her heart racing with suspicion. She found herself looking over her shoulder when she walked down the street, her mind racing with the thought that someone was watching her, following her. But she couldn't be sure. How could she be sure? Maybe she was just paranoid, maybe all of this was in her head. But the gut feeling, that relentless, gnawing fear, told her something darker was at play. It wasn't until she received a strange message late one night that everything took a sharp turn into the terrifying unknown. It came through an encrypted app, one she didn't even remember downloading. The message was simple, yet it sent a shockwave of panic through her entire body. You're being watched. Turn back now, or it will be worse for you. The message was signed with a symbol she didn't recognize, one she had never seen before. At first, Sarah thought it might have been another cruel prank, but deep down, she knew this wasn't like anything she'd experienced before. This wasn't just another warning. This was a threat, an unmistakable one, and it felt real. Her fingers hovered over the phone as she processed the words. She tried to breathe, to calm her racing pulse, but the weight of the situation only intensified with each passing second. She had already been living in the shadows, trying to piece together a story that made sense, but now it felt like she was being suffocated by it. This wasn't just about the business anymore, not about securing funding or proving people wrong. No, this had escalated into something far more dangerous. Someone was willing to hurt her if she didn't back down. That was the only thing that was certain. But what scared her even more was the thought that she wasn't just being targeted anymore. Her life wasn't the only one on the line. It wasn't long after she received the cryptic message that she realized Ethan had vanished. He hadn't answered his phone for hours, and his apartment was empty when she went to check on him. Panic began to rise in her chest as she tried to make sense of it. Ethan wasn't the type to disappear without a word, not unless something serious had happened. Was he a target too? Or had he been a part of this all along? Had he been hiding something so dark, so dangerous, that he had to run for his own safety? But the thought of him being involved in something criminal, something that could lead to all of this, seemed impossible. She didn't want to believe it, but the longer he stayed missing, the harder it became to ignore the possibility. Sarah knew she had to find him. But as she searched for clues, checking his apartment, his social media, calling every number she could think of, nothing added up. It was like he had vanished off the face of the earth, as if someone had erased him. As each hour passed with no sign of Ethan, her paranoia only deepened. The messages, the threats, the missing file, it all pointed to something much larger than she had initially believed. There were forces at play here, far beyond her comprehension, and they were closing in on her. The idea that Ethan might have been involved in all of this, that he might have known more than he let on, was a terrifying thought. Had he been protecting her, or had he been keeping her in the dark to protect himself? The more Sarah thought about it, the more her mind spiraled. She began to replay every moment they had shared over the past year, every conversation, every look. Had he been trying to warn her all along, or was he simply a pawn, just as she had been? And if he had been involved in this mess, what did that mean for her? Who could she trust now? The fear and uncertainty were suffocating, and as she walked down the streets of the city in a daze, her eyes darting nervously from side to side, she couldn't help but feel like someone was watching her, someone who knew exactly where she was at all times. Every person she passed seemed to glance at her a moment too long, every car that drove by seemed to slow just a little too much, and every shadow felt like it was hiding someone waiting to pounce. Sarah's breaths were shallow, her thoughts racing faster than she could keep up. She had to get to the bottom of this, but she didn't know how much longer she could stay one step ahead. That night, her worst fears were realized. As Sarah sat in her apartment, trying to collect her thoughts, she heard a soft knock at the door. Her heart leapt into her throat. She knew that knock, she had heard it before, in her mind, The one that came before everything went wrong. Hesitant but determined, she moved toward the door, her mind racing with possibilities. Who was on the other side? Was it someone she could trust, or was it another message, another threat, from whoever was pulling the strings behind all of this? When she opened the door, there was no one there. Just a package, sitting on the ground, wrapped in plain brown paper, with her name scrawled in the same bold handwriting from the earlier letters. She picked it up, her hands trembling. The contents were simple, yet chilling. Inside the package was a photo of her apartment, taken from the street, with her standing by the window, looking out into the night. The photo wasn't taken recently, either. It was from a few hours ago. The message that came with it was short and to the point: "You're not alone. You're being watched. Stay in your lane, or there will be consequences." The weight of that message hit her like a ton of bricks. Whoever had been sending these messages, whoever had been pulling the strings, knew exactly what she was doing at all times. She wasn't in control of this situation anymore. It was no longer just about uncovering the truth, it was about survival. The fear that had been creeping into her thoughts for days now took root in her chest. She was in deeper than she realized, surrounded by enemies she couldn't see, by people who were always one step ahead of her. It was clear now, she wasn't just a bystander in this game. She was the target. And she couldn't trust anyone, not even the people closest to her. The darkness was closing in, and Sarah felt it, felt the heavy weight of it pressing down on her. Her mind raced, her heart pounded in her chest, and the walls around her seemed to close in with each passing second. Was this the end of the road? Or was there still a way out? Her next move would be critical, but she didn't know who, if anyone, she could trust anymore. The game had changed, and the stakes were higher than she ever could have imagined. Every decision, every step she took now, felt like it could be her last. And so, Sarah was left standing in the dim light of her apartment, the photo in her hand, the weight of the world on her shoulders, and the haunting question that she couldn't answer. Who was behind all of this, and why had they targeted her? Just when Sarah thought she had reached the darkest point in the maze she was navigating, something happened that forced her to question everything, every person, every conversation, every moment that had brought her to this point. She was sitting at her desk, trying to piece together the fragments of a puzzle that no longer seemed to fit, when her phone buzzed. It was an unfamiliar number. Her heart skipped. It could be someone threatening her again, or maybe a new lead that would give her something to hold on to. But when she answered, it wasn't a cold voice on the other end, it was Ethan. For a split second, she thought she might have heard wrong. Ethan? Wasn't he gone? Missing without a trace? She couldn't have been more wrong. Sarah, Ethan's voice came through, strained but unmistakable. You need to listen to me. I know this doesn't make sense, but you have to understand. Everything you thought you knew about this, about me, none of it is what it seems. Her breath caught in her throat. Her mind raced. What was he talking about? How could this be real? He was supposed to be gone, out of her life, lost to whatever mess she'd stumbled into. But hearing his voice again, it was like a ghost coming back from the dead. How had he even gotten her number? Was he alive? Was this a trap? Where are you? Sarah asked, trying to control the panic rising in her chest. Why are you doing this? Why are you calling me now? I didn't have a choice, Sarah, Ethan continued, his voice barely a whisper. I didn't want you involved. I swear I didn't. But I made a mistake, and now you're tangled up in it, and I don't know how to get you out. Her mind was spinning. What mistake? What was Ethan saying? It felt like the walls around her were closing in once more, this time faster, more suffocating than ever before. She had trusted him. She had believed in him. But now, every doubt that had been creeping at the edges of her thoughts was suddenly crashing into her like a freight train. Ethan had been in on this from the beginning? Or was he just another player in the twisted game she had no control over? I'm not just talking about the business, Sarah, he said, and this time, there was fear in his voice. This goes deeper. The things you've uncovered, the things you've been chasing, they're connected to something much bigger. Something I got involved in years ago. And now they know what you're doing, and they're coming for you. It was as if the ground beneath her had cracked open. All the research, the clues, The missing pieces, it was connected to something that had started long before she even knew what she was stepping into. Ethan wasn't just a guy who helped her with business. He was involved in something dark. Something so dark that it stretched out beyond anything she could comprehend. The weight of his words was suffocating, and she couldn't stop herself from asking the question that had been gnawing at her for days. What's going on, Ethan? What are you not telling me? A long pause filled the silence. Sarah could hear his breathing on the other end, as if he were wrestling with something. Then, with a tone that was almost pleading, he finally spoke. Sarah, it wasn't supposed to be you. It was never supposed to be you. But now that you're this far in, it's too late. She felt her pulse race, the tension crackling in the air like static. What did he mean by that? Too late for what? Had she crossed some invisible line, stepped into something she couldn't back away from now? Was she just a pawn in a much bigger game, one where the rules were stacked against her from the very start? Before she could process the weight of his words, there was a loud knock at her door, so sudden and forceful it startled her. She froze, her heart pounding in her chest as she looked toward the entrance of her apartment. Who could it be? Was it him? Was Ethan here? Was he playing her, like everyone else had been? Or was it someone who had come to finish what had started? Ethan, she whispered, barely able to breathe, that he was silent on the other end of the line, and for a moment, Sarah thought she heard the distinct sound of someone else, someone who wasn't Ethan, moving in the background, faint whispers that seemed far too close. Then, almost as quickly as the noise came, it stopped. Ethan's voice returned, but now it was cold, distant, and full of regret. Sarah, you have to leave. Now. They know where you are. They know everything. Don't trust anyone, not even me. The words hit her like a punch to the gut. The realization that Ethan had been a part of something far darker than she could ever imagine began to settle into her bones, and the entire world seemed to shift beneath her feet. But before she could even respond, the phone went dead. She stared at it for a moment, her heart hammering in her chest as she scrambled to process what had just happened. The knock at the door came again, louder this time. There was no time to waste. She had to get out, she had to run, but where? Her mind raced, pulling her in every direction, trying to make sense of the chaos. Ethan had said they knew where she was, but who was they? And what exactly had he meant when he said it was too late? What had she stepped into? And why did it feel like the very people she trusted were the ones pulling the strings behind the scenes? With every passing moment, the sense of danger closed in tighter, her every instinct screaming at her to flee, to escape, but there was nowhere to go. She wasn't safe, not here, not anywhere. She approached the door cautiously, pressing her ear against it, but heard nothing on the other side. The silence was deafening. Could she even trust her own senses anymore? Maybe it was nothing. Maybe it was her paranoia taking hold, but deep down, she knew something had changed. The pieces she'd been chasing weren't just connected by a business deal gone wrong. No, they were part of something far bigger, something far more dangerous. And now, she was in the center of it all, caught between people who were playing a game she didn't understand, surrounded by lies, manipulation, and fear. As she slowly reached for the door handle, her thoughts consumed by the cryptic warning from Ethan, the realization hit her like a freight train. Maybe the person behind all of this wasn't someone she had trusted. Maybe it was someone much closer to her than she ever realized. The door opened, but what stood on the other side wasn't the person she had expected. It was someone from her past, someone she hadn't seen in years, and they were holding a gun. The gunman's eyes, cold and unfeeling, bore into Sarah like a dark hole pulling her in. The silence in her apartment was suffocating, a tangible weight pressing down on her chest. She wanted to scream, to fight, but the reality of the situation crushed any impulse to do so. The person standing in front of her, someone she hadn't seen in years, held all the power now. It wasn't just the gun. It was the past, the long-buried secrets that came with it, and the unspoken words that hovered between them. The last time she had seen this person, they were someone she had trusted with everything. But now, all of that felt like a distant memory. Sarah, the figure said, voice eerily calm, we both know why I'm here. You've gone too far. You need to stop. Now. There was a finality in their tone, as though the decision had already been made for her, and any resistance would only make things worse. She opened her mouth to speak, to ask questions that had been burning in her mind since the moment the mystery had taken shape. But what was the point? She already knew what they would say, what they would try to convince her of. This wasn't just a coincidence. This wasn't some random attack. This was personal. The person standing before her wasn't just some stranger hired to do a job. They were connected to her. They were someone who had known her, who had been a part of her life. And now they were here, holding all the cards. Who are you working for? Sarah's voice barely rose above a whisper, her fear threatening to choke her, but she had to know. She had to ask. Every part of her wanted to understand why this person, someone she thought she could trust, had become a threat. Why had they been so willing to hurt her, to draw her into this tangled mess? The figure didn't flinch, didn't show even a hint of emotion. I'm doing this to protect you. From them. From what's coming. The words stung more than the gun could ever do. Protect you. She almost couldn't believe it. This person who had been a part of her life, was claiming they were protecting her. But every single clue, pointed to them being part of the very thing that had trapped her in this nightmare. You have no idea what you're up against. They're not what they seem. They've been pulling strings for years, and now you're at the center of it. Sarah's mind was spinning, her body frozen in place as she tried to process the contradiction in front of her. It didn't make sense. None of it did. How could the very person who had been part of her past, who had once been a safe haven, now be part of the storm tearing her apart? She didn't know whether to cry, scream, or simply give in to the overwhelming pressure. Then, just as she thought her world couldn't collapse any further, the figure's next words shattered whatever semblance of control she had left. You can't win this, Sarah. You need to make a choice. The truth, or your life. They paused, the weight of the ultimatum hanging heavy in the air. If you keep pushing, if you keep looking for answers, they'll destroy everything you care about. If you walk away now, if you drop this whole thing and stay silent, I can protect you. I can make sure you're safe. But if you don't, if you keep digging, you'll be dead. And anyone who gets close to you will be too. The words hit her like a slap, each one cutting deeper than the last. The truth, the very thing that had driven her to this point, the thing that kept her up at night, the thing that haunted her every step, was now the very thing that could cost her everything. Her safety. Her freedom. Her future. And the people she cared about. She could feel her pulse pounding in her ears, the choice laid out before her like an impossible chasm. It wasn't just about her anymore. It wasn't just about solving the puzzle. It was about deciding what she valued more, her pursuit of the truth, or the people she loved and her own survival. She could feel the gravity of it all, the weight of the decision pressing down on her shoulders. Each step she took now could bring her closer to destruction. And yet, the pull of the truth was undeniable. How could she walk away, knowing what she now knew, knowing that the answers were within reach? The gun, steady in the figure's hand, was a silent reminder of the stakes. They weren't bluffing. This wasn't some game. If she didn't make the right choice, the consequences would be real and they would be devastating. But how could she walk away from this now? In that moment, everything felt like it was closing in. The walls of her apartment seemed to shrink, her breath catching in her throat as she tried to make sense of the impossible choice before her. Her eyes flicked back and forth between the figure and the gun, and then to the door. Every option seemed to lead to a dead end. No matter which path she chose, she would lose something or someone she cared about. There was no way out that didn't come with a price. Sarah, the figure pressed, their voice softening slightly as they took a step closer. Please. I never wanted you involved in this. But it's too late now. You've already seen too much, and now you have to decide. You can't keep fighting the way you have been. It's not worth it. The words sliced through her, each one deeper than the last. It's not worth it. That's what they wanted her to believe. That the pursuit of the truth, the quest for answers, wasn't worth the cost. But was it? Was it truly worth everything she had to give up to uncover the truth? Could she live with herself knowing she had the power to stop it all, just by walking away? And yet, somewhere deep inside her, she knew she couldn't. She couldn't live with herself if she just gave in. The truth, whatever it was, had to be out there, and she couldn't stop now. She had to keep going. Even if it meant destroying everything around her. Even if it meant facing consequences she couldn't possibly imagine. But as she opened her mouth to speak, to make her decision, the figure's hand moved. In one fluid motion, they raised the gun, aiming it directly at her. Think carefully, they warned, their voice cold again, their gaze unwavering. One wrong move, and you'll never have the chance to make a choice again. Sarah's heart stopped. The finality of the moment was suffocating. The gun in the figure's hand, the impossible choice, the weight of her own fears and doubts pressing down on her, it all culminated in this single moment. She had to choose. There was no more time. No more room for hesitation. And as she stared at the barrel of the gun, Sarah realized with a sickening certainty that the most dangerous thing wasn't the gun. It wasn't the threats or the lies or the people who had manipulated her all along. It was the fact that, in the end, the truth itself might be more than she was willing to face. The tension was unbearable, and the world around her seemed to stand still as she realized the only thing more terrifying than the unknown was the person standing in front of her and the price she would pay for discovering the truth. The choice was hers, but which would she choose? The weight of the gun in the figure's hand was nothing compared to the weight pressing down on Sarah's chest. Every inch of the room seemed to close in on her, the walls, the windows, everything a reminder of how trapped she really was. Her breath came in shallow gasps as the silence between them stretched out, the air heavy with an unspoken tension that could snap at any moment. The gun was steady in the figure's grasp, but it wasn't just the weapon that held her hostage, it was the truth she was so desperately trying to uncover. And now, as the seconds ticked by, she felt it all crashing down around her. She could hear her own pulse in her ears, deafening in its intensity. There was no way out. She could feel it in her bones. This wasn't just about her anymore. It never had been. As she stood frozen, weighing the impossible choice in front of her, the figure's face remained cold, unyielding, like a mask concealing everything they had done, everything they had been part of. But then, just as the room seemed to suffocate her, a new voice, one she never expected to hear, shattered the tension. "Drop the gun." Sarah's heart skipped a beat, a surge of disbelief running through her. The voice, sharp, authoritative, familiar, came from the doorway. She turned, her eyes widening in shock as another figure stepped into the room. It was Tom. The same Tom who had been there for her from the start. The one she had trusted completely. Her ally. Or so she had thought. "Tom," she whispered, her voice shaky as she struggled to make sense of the scene unfolding before her. "What are you doing here? Why are you?" "You need to listen to me, Sarah," Tom interrupted, his tone cold, hard, and completely unlike the person she thought she knew. "Everything you've been chasing, everything you've been fighting for, it's all part of a much bigger plan. You've been played. You've been too naive to see it, but it's time you face the truth." For a moment, Sarah felt like the ground had been ripped out from under her. She couldn't believe what she was hearing. Tom? Part of this? How? He had been the one she had leaned on. The one she had trusted with every detail of her investigation. The one who had sat across from her, listening to her doubts, her fears, and had promised to help her find the truth. But now, standing in front of her with a dark, unreadable expression, he was telling her something she didn't want to hear. "You're working for them?" she asked, barely able to breathe the words. The realization hit her with the force of a freight train. Tom, her friend, her confidant, had been playing her the whole time. "Not exactly," Tom replied, his voice a mixture of regret and something colder. "But I've been a part of something much bigger than you realize. And now it's your turn to decide whether you want to live in the world you've been trying to change or accept the reality of what's coming." He took a step forward, his eyes locked on hers. "This conspiracy, Sarah, this thing you've been chasing? It's global. Bigger than any of us. And no matter what you do now, you're not going to stop it. You're too far in, and it's already been set in motion." The words struck like a slap to the face. She had always believed she was the one uncovering the conspiracy, chasing down the truth, piecing the puzzle together, but now it was clear she had been a pawn all along. The truth wasn't a matter of finding the right clue. It was about controlling the narrative. And all along, Tom had known more than he was letting on. The weight of betrayal hit her like a physical blow, and her mind raced, trying to reconcile the friend she thought she knew with the person standing before her now, ready to make her a part of the game that was far beyond anything she could have imagined. Tom, you, Sarah's voice faltered, every word a struggle as she tried to hold herself together. You lied to me. I never lied, he said quietly, his eyes narrowing. I just didn't tell you everything. The gunman didn't flinch, but Sarah could see the tension in his stance, the hesitation, the uncertainty. He wasn't sure what to make of the sudden shift in the room, and for a split second, Sarah thought she might have a chance to escape, to take control of the situation. But then she realized the truth. This wasn't just about one man with a gun anymore. This was about the entire conspiracy, the web that had entangled not just her, but everyone around her. The more she tried to understand, the clearer it became. Tom had been in on this from the very beginning, manipulating events to lead Sarah here, to this moment. Every time she thought she had uncovered something, every step she took forward, he had been right there with her, directing her toward a path she had no idea she was being led down. She had been playing right into their hands. You think you have a choice, Sarah? Tom continued, his voice now tinged with an edge of impatience. You don't. They've already decided your fate. You're not walking away from this, no matter how hard you try. The only question left is whether you'll help us, or be destroyed in the process. The finality of his words hit her like a punch to the gut. Help them. After everything? She couldn't even begin to process the idea. She thought she had been fighting for something meaningful, for justice, for truth, but now she was facing a wall of lies so thick she couldn't see through it anymore. And the worst part was that she still didn't know who they were. Who was behind all of this? Who was pulling the strings? Was Tom part of that, or was he just another pawn? You're going to kill me, aren't you? Sarah's voice trembled as she spoke the words she never wanted to say. It felt like the truth, but saying it out loud made it real. No, Tom said, his voice soft but firm. I'm not going to kill you. But you're going to wish you were dead once you realize what you've gotten yourself into. And in that moment, everything she thought she knew shattered. The truth wasn't what she expected. The people she trusted weren't who they seemed. And the conspiracy? It was only just beginning. The room exploded with chaos as Sarah made her move, every ounce of strength she had left poured into one final act of defiance. The gunshot rang out, but not in the way anyone expected. The final twist of fate was here. And nothing was what it seemed. In the end, Sarah realized the conspiracy wasn't just about her. It was about power. It was about control. And now, she was the one pulling the strings. The aftermath of the chaos felt like a heavy fog descending on Sarah. The adrenaline, which had fueled her every move for so long, was slowly draining away, leaving her feeling hollow, as though the weight of everything she had uncovered, everything she had lost, was now pressing down on her shoulders. The final confrontation had left her shaken, but she was alive. She had made it out. And for the first time in what felt like forever, she stood alone, free from the shadow of the conspiracy that had consumed her life for so long. But freedom wasn't the sweet relief she had imagined. It didn't feel like victory, not in the way she had expected. As she sat alone in her small apartment that night, the reality of what she had experienced settled into her bones, heavy and unyielding. The people she thought she could trust were gone. Mark, Tom, the shadowy figures who had used her for their own purposes, they were either behind bars, on the run, or simply lost to the dark network of corruption that stretched far beyond anything she could have anticipated. The pieces of the puzzle had finally come together, but what was left was a wreckage, a fractured version of herself, and an eerie quiet that left her wondering if the world she had fought so hard to change was really any different after all. In the weeks that followed, the news cycles spun wild with the revelations she had uncovered. Headlines blared with the names of powerful figures brought down by the exposure of the conspiracy, but there was something hollow about it. The system, the ones who had been the puppeteers pulling the strings behind the scenes, didn't crumble the way she had imagined. They adapted. They regrouped. They weren't as easily defeated as she had hoped. And that realization stung deeper than anything she had encountered during her investigation. What had it all been for? Was it truly over? Or had she merely been a small part in a much larger game? One evening, as she sat at her desk, flipping through the mountain of documents she had painstakingly compiled over the months, something caught her eye, a single, overlooked detail in one of the files. At first, it seemed insignificant, just another minor connection in the vast web of information she had already dissected. But as she traced the lines, as she put the pieces together, her breath caught in her throat. The name was familiar, one she hadn't expected to see in any of the files, yet there it was written in plain text as though it had been deliberately hidden in plain sight all along. It wasn't a person she had encountered during her investigation. No, this name belonged to someone far removed from the conspiracy she thought she had destroyed. Someone connected to the core of the operation. Someone who, despite everything that had happened, still had control. Someone she hadn't even considered. Her mind spun as she realized the depth of the game she had just finished playing. The truth she had uncovered, the pieces she had assembled, they weren't the whole picture. Far from it. She had pulled back one curtain, but there were still so many left untouched, so many more layers of lies waiting to be unraveled. She wasn't finished. The conspiracy, though weakened, wasn't gone. It was still breathing, still alive, and now it was clear that she had merely scratched the surface. The feeling of unease lingered as Sarah sat back, letting the weight of the discovery settle in. She had thought she could walk away. She had thought that exposing the truth, bringing justice, would finally free her from the grip of the darkness that had suffocated her. But now, with this new knowledge, the same burning questions she had wrestled with for so long surged to the surface once again. Who was really in control? How deep did this go? Was there a way out, or was she forever bound to a cycle she couldn't escape? Sarah didn't have the answers, not yet. But she knew one thing for certain: she had to keep going. She couldn't let it end like this, not with so many pieces left unresolved. The world she had uncovered wasn't the world she had imagined, but maybe, just maybe, she had a part to play in reshaping it. She had been used, manipulated, betrayed, but she wasn't broken. She wasn't going to let the darkness define her. Not anymore. As she closed the file and pushed it aside, a single thought flashed through her mind: the truth was out there. But it wasn't just one truth. It was a labyrinth of lies, a web of deceit that stretched further than she could have ever dreamed. And maybe, just maybe, she wasn't the one who would bring it all to light. But she would never stop searching. Never stop fighting. The final piece was still out there. And Sarah wasn't done yet. She walked to the window, the cool night air brushing against her face as she stared out at the city, the lights twinkling below like 1,000 scattered stars. It was quiet now, but she knew it wouldn't last. There was more to come. There always was. The question, however, was what she would do next. Would she continue the fight, now that she knew how deep the conspiracy really ran? Or would she step back, walk away, and let the shadows reclaim what they had taken from her? The answer wasn't clear. But one thing was certain: Sarah had become part of something far bigger than herself. And in the end, she might just be the only one capable of uncovering the full truth. As the screen faded to black, the weight of Sarah's journey lingered in the air. The questions remained unanswered, the mysteries unsolved. And yet, there was a flicker of hope in the uncertainty. A chance to make a difference, to change the game. The story might have come to an end, but the world she had stepped into was far from over. And as the credits rolled, viewers couldn't help but wonder, what if this was only the beginning? It's one of those moments when you wonder how something like this could happen. There's no owner in sight, just this tiny creature standing in the middle of the sidewalk, as if waiting for someone to notice it. You bend down, trying to comfort it, but as you reach out, you realize this isn't just any ordinary dog. No, this one is different. The moment your hand touches its fur, everything changes, and the mystery begins. Now, I want you to stop right here and think for a second: how far would you go to solve a mystery like this? A lost dog, with no tags, no collar, no clear sign of where it belongs, and yet, something about this situation feels off. You feel that, don't you? It's like there's something more at play here, something deeper, waiting to be uncovered. And trust me, by the end of this video, you're going to find out the one thing that will leave you absolutely stunned. I promise you, you won't believe it, and you'll never look at lost dogs the same way again. Stay with me. I'm not here just to tell you a story. No, this is your story now. You're going to want to know exactly what happens next, because the twist will have you second-guessing everything you thought you knew about fate, destiny, and even royalty. And hey, don't worry. This isn't your usual tale of a lost pet. There's a bigger picture here, and I'm going to unravel it piece by piece, layer by layer, so you can experience every heart-pounding moment with me. The dog's eyes were more than just the tired, lonely eyes of a stray. They were full of something else, something unspoken, something royal. Yes, you heard that right. Royalty. But at that moment, there was no way to know just how closely tied this dog was to a world that most of us can only dream about. That's the secret I'm about to reveal to you. I'm not going to give it all away just yet, but let's rewind a bit to the very first moment this lost dog appeared. The dog wasn't just any mutt or street dog. No, this dog had been through something. Its coat was a little too clean for an animal living on the streets. It had a certain poise, if you will. You could tell that this wasn't just a regular stray looking for food. Something about it screamed importance, something about it whispered that this was a creature who had lived a different life before all of this. And this is where the true mystery begins to unfold. This is the part that I need you to pay attention to. What would you do if you were in this situation? Would you walk away? Or would you try to find out where this dog came from? Well, our story's heroine, let's call her MIA for now, decided that she wasn't going to just ignore this little creature. She couldn't. Something about it just pulled at her heartstrings in a way that felt inevitable. But MIA didn't know just how deep this rabbit hole would go when she decided to take the dog in. And let's be honest here, what happens next will completely flip the script. After a few days of searching for any signs of an owner, MIA came across something strange. She wasn't looking for any clues, but one day while out for a walk with the dog, a man approached her with a question that would change everything. He looked at the dog, and then at MIA, with a look that screamed urgency. But the strange part. He didn't ask if the dog belonged to her. Instead, he asked if she had found the dog. And from there, the entire world MIA thought she knew would never be the same. Now, I'm sure you're wondering what's so special about this man. Why was he so desperate to know where the dog had come from? Was he a pet owner who had lost his beloved pet? Was he simply worried about the dog's safety? At first, it seemed that way. But trust me, the truth was far stranger than anyone could have ever imagined. I know what you're thinking. You're probably asking yourself, what could possibly be the big reveal? Why should I keep watching? Well, the answer to that question is simple. The dog was only the beginning. This man, the one who MIA thought was just another concerned citizen, turns out, he wasn't who he appeared to be. His questions, his mannerisms, and his presence. All part of something far larger than any of us could have guessed. Are you intrigued yet? You should be. Because what happens next is something that will leave you questioning everything you thought you knew about fate, destiny, and even how you view the world around you. The man's true identity comes to light, and it's a revelation that no one could have predicted. But I'm not going to spoil that for you just yet. Instead, I'm going to let the story unfold at its own pace, keeping you hooked and wanting more. By the time this is all said and done, you'll be hooked on this mystery, and I guarantee you won't be able to stop thinking about it. But before I reveal the shocking truth behind the man's identity and how this lost dog was tied to royalty, I need you to ask yourself one question. How far would you go to protect someone or something that seemed completely out of your reach? Would you risk everything for the truth, even if it meant stepping into a world that was foreign and dangerous? That's the path MIA had to walk. She had to make a choice, and it wasn't just about whether or not to trust this stranger. It was about deciding how much of her own life she was willing to risk for the sake of the dog and ultimately, for the man she had yet to realize was a prince. The deeper MIA dug, the more she realized that this wasn't just some coincidence. The dog's sudden appearance in her life wasn't random. No, it was a catalyst, a turning point in her life that would open up doors she never expected to walk through. And I'm telling you, the door behind that dog wasn't one she could have ever imagined opening. I know you're sitting there on the edge of your seat, eager to find out how this all plays out. Well, let me tell you this, you're not going to want to miss the twist that's coming. Stay tuned, because the mystery isn't over yet. It's only just begun. You won't believe who this man really is or how he's connected to the dog. And when you find out, trust me, you'll never look at a lost dog the same way again. So stick around. I've got a story that's about to change everything you thought you knew about fate, destiny, and a little lost dog who holds the key to it all. Keep watching, because trust me, you don't want to miss what happens next. Emma had always been a woman who lived a quiet life. She wasn't one to seek attention or chase after excitement. In fact, she had been going through a bit of a rough patch lately, trying to figure out what her next steps were in a world that seemed to be moving faster than she could keep up with. Her job at the local art gallery was fulfilling but didn't exactly pay the bills like she hoped it would. Her social life had been mostly limited to the occasional coffee with friends and long evening walks, trying to clear her mind. But even though she had her own sense of stability, something had felt off for months now, like she was waiting for some big change to happen, even though she didn't know exactly what that change would be. In the days leading up to finding the lost dog, MIA had been spending more time in the park than usual.